Okay, guys, let's kick this sucker into gear, huh? All right, so hopefully everybody can see my screen. Looks like you can. Yeah, yeah. There's no death to PowerPoint on this one. There's going to be a lot of PowerPoint here. Okay, let's get rolling. Okay, so the whole focus here is what's it take to really build a pen test lab, a hack lab, something that you can really get in and really drive around and do some pretty interesting stuff, something that's going to prepare you for, hacking in the real world, pen testing in the real world, doing incident response, doing forensics, what's really going to get you there. And a lot of us are just using really simple virtualization stuff, either VMware or Virtualbox, and you're pretty much just you attacking your one Windows XP VM or your one Windows 7 VM, and that's about it. There's only so much MS-0867 attacks you can do before it starts to get kind of like, you watch these YouTube videos and you see them kind of do stuff, but even if you watch a lot of YouTube videos to try and learn what is the latest hacks, you'll often see that it's still just a lot of MS-0867 immediately followed by a couple of interpreter commands. So that's kind of what I wanted to focus this around. How do I get you to start building your own infrastructure so that it turns into the type of thing that can replicate a live environment, something that will really kind of help you, accelerate your career. So let's jump in. Okay, so today we're going to cover hardware tips, software tips, VMware tips, and Virtualbox tips, and then, of course, the Pentester stuff. I'm not going to cover things like Zen, Virtuoso, some of the other things. I've also had people ask me about, online options, like CloudOcean and CloudSource and Rackspace and Amazon and all that kind of stuff. That's not what this will be about. If there's enough interest in those types of webinars, I'll definitely cover that kind of stuff because there's a lot that you can do with Amazon EC2 and Amazon Virtual Private Cloud and that kind of stuff. But what you get into with that stuff is it sounds cheap when you first get started, but I think you'll very quickly realize it is not cheap. So we'll cover that stuff if there's interest in it. Okay, let's talk hardware. The first thing that you want to deal with when you're talking hardware, people want to know, well, hey, I got a couple of old machines. I got an old laptop. Can I jump on with that? What I've been thinking is I got, 2 old laptops. I'll throw Linux on them, and, I'll mess around with that. If that's where you are, I think you really don't want to do that. What I think you want to do is take your current laptop, install VMware or VirtualBox, install Ubuntu, and learn Linux. If you really want to build an environment, you're really not going to be able to build all that on an old laptop. You're probably going to want to build a whitebox. And what I mean by whitebox is, a Frankenstein machine. You're going to go to Newegg or something like that, buy the parts, and put a machine together. So steer clear of the old laptop stuff. You do not want to be running your HackLab on cheesy hardware. If you're going to use cheesy hardware, I would say, build yourself a couple of servers on cheesy hardware. It's a great way to learn Linux and stuff like that. That's what that kind of stuff is for. Okay, what's the thing that I recommend? I really recommend a shuttle box. Now, don't get me wrong. I'm not saying that this is like, oh my God, cheap. Because a shuttle box, fairly built out will be somewhere between, $600 and $1,000. So I don't want to say it's super cheap, but you can get a machine, that's about the size of a shoebox that'll run, pretty comfortably 32 gig of RAM, with a nice SATA hard drive, 500 gig SATA hard drive, something like that, terabyte SATA hard drive. And, you can put that whole thing together for $800–900. and that'll easily run, 30 or 50 virtual machines. So you can run an environment, well, it won't be 200-300 virtual machines, but you can run a couple of, 30, 40 virtual machines on something like this pretty good. Now, this link that I've got here is a really good walkthrough on how to build an ESXi box running vSphere at home. And we're going to talk a little bit more about all this kind of stuff too. vSphere and ESXi and all that. There's a couple things we need to talk about with that stuff. Okay, software tips. The biggest thing that I run into is people want to know, if you're going to do this, where do you get everything from? Legally. Can you pirate software, jump on Pirate Bay and jump on the torrents and, get all this stuff? Yeah, of course we can. You want to get the latest copy of server, blah, blah, blah. Yeah, you can go and you can download it illegally, of course. However, you really run the risk of downloading malware. You very likely can say, hey, I got the latest version of VMware or the latest version because I didn't want to pay for ESX. I wanted to download ESX instead of just using the free version of ESXi. I wanted to download a fresh copy of Server 2008, with a key generator and a crack or something like that. You can certainly do that kind of stuff, but, what you really kind of run into is, one, legal stuff. Two, you might inject malware into your environment. So I'm going to try to tell you, stay away from stuff like that. Look, I can't tell you what's the right thing to do and, thou shalt not, but you can actually build this stuff on the cheap. So I'm a really big fan of the MSDN. Now, one of the big gripes with the MSDN is Microsoft changed their pricing structure this past year. You used to be able to pay a couple of $1,000s and get all of the Microsoft products. I mean, all of them. Every software, every server, everything, right? So it used to be the best way to build your home environment because you would get, small business server and the full-blown versions of the servers. You'd get, the ISA products. You used to be able to get everything. And, they've now changed the price of that, so that stuff's a lot more expensive. So a lot of people want to know, hey, Joe, how do you do this kind of stuff? And I am a huge fan of something called books.half.ebay. So I buy used books or low-cost books. The reason that I like to buy these low-cost books is, let's say you buy a book on Server 2008, especially one from like MS Press or something like that. You can get the book oftentimes used, and there'll be a trial version of the operating system. So you'll get the CD, DVD, and you'll have a trial version of that newest operating system or whatever that piece of software is, and it's a way that you can kind of get in on it pretty cheap. So you might be able to buy the book for $8, $10 and then get a copy of Server 2012. So now you got a fresh copy of that. Maybe you buy a book on SCOM and System Center and all that kind of stuff. Comes with a CD, and now you can build that stuff out. So for me, even though they're trials, it's usually enough to kind of get you going and get you playing with that stuff. Now, I can give you a Pentester lesson that's going to be later in the slides, but I can tell you right now, if you can't administer it, you really should not pen test it. And that's a real good life lesson. Anything that you want to be able to pen test, you should be able to admin it. You should be able to build and deploy SharePoint. If you claim you want to pen test SharePoint, you should be able to build and deploy a System Center if you want to be able to pen test System Center. So these are the types of things that you really got to start thinking about. A lot of people, they're a little reluctant to sit down and really dig in and build, but you're going to have to. If you want to get better, you're going to need to build. Now, what's that going to do for you on the consulting side? When you're a pen tester, when you talk to a customer and you're telling them, hey, here's what you need to do for these security recommendations to improve this or lock this down, it's better that you're speaking from having done it. You're speaking from that experience of, you've done this before. Even if it's in your home lab, at least you've done it. Okay. All right, a couple of people have already said some really good things. Microsoft offers 180-day trials for most of their software on technet.microsoft.com/en-us/evaluation, eval center. And then also people joining the IEEE get free versions of software. Okay, so yeah, there's definitely some good places where you can get stuff. Okay, next thing. Where do you get all the vulnerable applications? I really like oldapps.com. Huge, huge for me. Oldapps.com is a great way to get vulnerable software. Also, exploit-db.com. One of the things that really made exploit-db.com a lot better than Millworm, for those of you who remember Millworm, exploit-db, when they have an exploit, they oftentimes will give you the link to the vulnerable software itself. And I'm telling you, that's going to be pretty handy. That's going to be pretty handy. So definitely try to get your hands on as many of the vulnerable softwares as you can, especially from places like oldapps.com. Okay, one of the things that people often ask me is, what do I think about common vulnerable targets, things like Metasploitable, Web Security Dojo, Web Maven, Moth, Damn Vulnerable Web App, and VICE, and these types of things. And I think they're good. I think they're very good for beginners. When you're first getting started using products like WebGoat and this kind of stuff, they're great for you to understand a concept of how something works. You want to understand how cross-site scripting works. You want to understand how a buffer overflow works or what a password brute forcing attack actually looks like. That's great. I think once you're kind of ready to take the training wheels off, for lack of a better word, you're going to want to get away from stuff like this. They're good to, like I said, to learn a concept. They're not really good for replicating what a real environment is going to be like. And that's why I think you're going to want to build more stuff. I think you would get a whole lot more out of, let's say, for example, building a Linux server, running WordPress, and then going to ExploitDB and downloading every vulnerable WordPress plugin that you can find an exploit for. Download all those WordPress plugins, install them, build a small website with all these vulnerable plugins, and see if you can find vulnerabilities that aren't listed in the ExploitDB database. And I guarantee you there will be a ton. Now bear in mind, this is something that you would do after you've already done the WebGoat, the Damn Vulnerable Web App. This is not something you do before that. You've got to get comfortable on products like WebGoat, Damn Vulnerable Web App, and stuff like that. Once you're done with those, then it's time to try to build a website and mess with it. See if you can find, hey, here's another cross-site scripting in the same plugin. Hey, here's another SQL injection in the same plugin. You're going to find that there's a ton of that stuff. You know, I always tell people vulnerabilities are like roaches. If you see one, guarantee you there's going to be a whole lot more. Okay, next thing. Most of you guys who know me know that I'm a VMware guy. Have I used VirtualBox? I did use VirtualBox for almost 2 years. I was VMware first, then I went to VirtualBox, and then I ended up coming back to VMware. I'm a pretty heavy VMware user at this point. So I started using VMware back in, oh my God, I think I started using VMware in like 2001. And I used it pretty heavily up until about 2010. And then in 2010, I really kind of ran into some issues, because those of you who knew me knew that I was a big Linux user. And I was using Fedora, and Fedora really kind of ran into some issues with VMware support around that time, especially if you were getting into the 64-bit versions of stuff. And one of the problems that I had using VMware in Linux was any time that I updated my kernel, I needed to update VMware. So it just turned into this constant pain in the butt of constantly dealing with VMware breaking whenever there was a pretty good chunk of updates to Linux. So I decided to go with VirtualBox. And now when I was using VirtualBox, I absolutely loved it. I could update Linux all I want, and most of the VMware features that I used were in VirtualBox, especially once you got a good hold of VirtualBox guest editions. So that was great. The problem that I ran into from my standpoint as an instructor, when I would go places and teach, if I gave out virtual machines, people would have to copy the virtual machine from a CD or USB key to their machine. Then they would have to import it into VirtualBox, and that just took a long time. So I ended up finally moving back. Then I ended up moving back to VMware. What's my opinion of Fedora versus Ubuntu as a host? As a host, to run VMware, I think you're going to get a lot better functionality out of Ubuntu. The VMware tools install and all that stuff is almost transparent in doing it in Ubuntu. Do I prefer Ubuntu over VMware personally? No. Over Fedora personally? No. I'm definitely a Red Hat groupie and been using Dead Rat clones for years, so I prefer the CentOS Fedora world over the Ubuntu world personally, but I think if you're using VMware specifically, I think you'll find way more doing Ubuntu as both a host and a guest. Okay. All right, so quick VMware stuff. One of the things in VMware that's really, really cool is the ability to create what are called linked clones. So with linked clones, you can take a virtual machine and then you can just say, hey, spin up a clone of this sucker. So let's say I'm using, in my case, I'm using VMware Workstation. So I'm right here using VMware Workstation 10. Let's say I go to Manage and I want to choose to clone it. So now the wizard comes up, and now here it says, hey, do you want to create a clone from this virtual image? Now the virtual image is turned off. So I just say, yeah, it's going to create a linked clone. Now a linked clone takes a virtual machine and uses that virtual machine as a reference. So as long as that machine is turned off, you turn that machine off, now you make these clones. Basically what it does is it creates a whole second folder, and it copies a differential file, a diff file, and then all that does is keep track of the differences between the clone and the original machine. So it takes way less disk space, but it has to have access to the original virtual machine. So what's nice is you just spin up a VM, build it out the way you want, turn it off, and then create as many linked clones as you want. So what's really nice is, let's say I go through this and I'll click Next, and now it says, hey, let's build your clone. I say Finish, and now my clone is built. I mean, it's that fast. And you can build as many of them as you want. Now, what's cool is you can take the original machine, boot it up. Let's say you make 20 clones. You take the original machine, boot it up, make a change to it, shut it back down. When you boot up any of the clones, those clones will take on the change that you made to the one major machine. So it's a really nice way. This is some of those features in VMware that's just really, really, really powerful. Now this is in Workstation 10. So one of the questions I was just asked is, hey, do you like the latest version of Workstation? And yeah, I do like it. It's actually pretty cool. Can you run the clones simultaneously? The answer is yes. So you can run as many of the clones as you want, as long as you have the resources to run them. You certainly can. So I do like it. It's pretty handy. Now, in the free versions of stuff, like the VMware Player and the VMware ESXI, no. VMware loves you so much that they want your money if they're going to give you the really cool toys. So that's why you'll see people who are way smarter than me who came up with what's called the ghetto clone. Now the ghetto clone, if you're using VMware ESXi, the free version of VMware, now the ESX infrastructure is what runs on what's called bare metal. So you don't install an operating system. You don't install Windows or Linux and then install VMware. You literally just install VMware on a server. That's the reason why you saw me recommending the Shuttlebox. You just install it right on the Shuttlebox because it'll fall into the bare metal class. So you spin that up, away you go. ESX ghetto clone is a script that does some command line ninja stuff with shell scripting to create virtual clones. So you just run the ghetto, you say sh ghetto ESXi link clones, and then you specify the clone name and then the number. So you're going to specify like 15. Boom, that sucker will make 15 link clones. Sweetest thing I've ever seen, man. It's unbelievable. Hardware issues on the Shuttlebox. I got that sucker running right now. It's actually in my lab network, and that boy just hums right along. Will you have the presentation slides? The answer is yes. Okay. What about deploying things like Snort, Surricata, you know, all that kind of stuff? How many VMs do I run on one Shuttlebox? My Shuttlebox has 32 gig of RAM, and as long as they're XP machines, we can probably run about 50 to 60 of them. If they're Windows 7, we probably run about 15 of them before the machine really starts to kind of bog down. Okay. What do you use for a SAN, storage area network, inside of ESXi? I would tell you to use NFS mounts and then to just buy one of these external NAS solutions and just use ESX with NFS. Additional specs on the Shuttlebox? Yes, I can provide that to you, sure. Okay. Processor, RAM, yeah, I've got a whole email that I've sent to a bunch of people with that. Oh, you want the link again? Yeah, no problem. Oh, you need those specs, huh? Okay. All right, well, I'll get that link out to everybody. Let's move on in the presentation, and I'll get you everything you need. I think the best deal for it was on Newegg, but we'll get through that. Okay, next question. If you're going to run things like Snort, Surricata, Bro, any of the IDSs, you want to make sure that you configure your virtual switching to allow for it. So I've got some links that you'll find pretty helpful for that. Some people ask me about VMware's virtual switching capabilities, and now that I'm actually using a lot of that kind of stuff, it's nice, don't get me wrong, I don't want to say it's horrible, but you're going to really need to make a decision of, do you want advanced switching functionality, or do you basically just want VLANing? So what do I mean? Your vSwitch can do some pretty awesome things, right? Your vSwitch can do VLAN trunking, your vSwitch can do link bonding, frame forwarding. So like link bonding, you can shotgun multiple network interfaces, and join them together and expand your bandwidth on the particular interface. You can create VLANs and trunk, and you can do some pretty cool stuff. Now, when you want to get into advanced switching features like spanning tree, advanced quality of service type stuff, NetFlow, SFlow, VLAN ACLs, and that kind of stuff, you're gonna want to kind of find something a little bit more robust. What you more than likely want to do is you want to either move into something like Dynamips, Dynagems, GNS3, or you want to actually try to see if you can get some of these Cisco virtual appliances that are routers and switches that are essentially running as virtual machines themselves. Okay. All right, what do I think about using things like GNS3 for simulating network infrastructure? I'm actually going to cover a little bit of that today. I really like it a lot. The thing that you got to remember if you're going to use Dynamips, Dynagems, GNS3 is you're going to have real Cisco IOSs to run all of that stuff, and then your switching capabilities in GNS3 gives you layer 2, but not necessarily layer 3 switching. So you're going to be able to do dumb switching, simple VLANing, but you won't be able to do really advanced switching features. So people who are studying for like their CCNP and that kind of stuff, they find that they have to do a lot of jerry-rigging to get some really advanced switching features. All right, VirtualBox. VirtualBox gives you a lot of features. I got a feeling if you don't really want to get real heavy into routing and switching, your VirtualBox infrastructure on ShuttleBox might be what you want to do. Seriously. But, that's debatable. So let me kind of cover a couple of things. Building and running VirtualBox headless, you can do that, especially if you're trying to cut down on resources. You've got something called PHP VirtualBox now, which gives you a web interface, and it automatically installs a remote desktop VNC type app so that you can just log into each one. Creating backups and clones in VirtualBox, raw devices. I'll start talking about this stuff right now. I actually like PHP VirtualBox. If you're going to run a headless VirtualBox because you've got your ShuttleBox and you just want to install VirtualBox on it and go down that road and then access it through a web interface, I think you'll find that you really like this. A lot of people are doing a very similar setup to what I'm doing, where you build your infrastructure and then your VPN is a virtual machine that runs on it. ShuttleBoxes have a hardware RAID? No, you'd have to install a RAID controller manually. You have to put something in it. Okay. Okay, backups and clones. There's some pretty cool things out there for doing backing up and cloning from a command line so that you can script it in VirtualBox or some of that stuff. Is it anywhere near as robust as VMware's Power CLI? Not even close. The things that you can do with VMware's Power CLI, you've got some really, really impressive stuff that you can do out there with that. Can you interact with raw devices? Yes, you can interact with raw devices, direct hardware access. You can do that. You want to do serial port stuff, like let's say, like in our exploit dev class, we do some kernel exploit stuff. You can use your virtual infrastructure to attach to the serial port of another virtual machine, and then attach your debugger to that, and that's how you do kernel virtual exploits. Does VMware have something like a PHP Virtualbox? Yes. So the newest versions of VMware are moving to a new interface. So it's not going to look like what I do right now with my vSphere. So let's say if you look at my vSphere interface, so here's vCenter. And now for every ESXi server that I have, you'll see that it's running a number of virtual machines. Okay. All right, so this one's my Dell 410, and you can see that it's what, 40 gig of RAM, and it's running how many virtual machines right now? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. So it's got 12 virtual machines running on it right now. 12 virtual machines. 9 Windows 7, 1 Ubuntu, 1 Security Onion, but this is the Security Onion server, and then 1 machine that's running as a domain controller, and it's taking looks like about 23 gig out of that 40 gig of memory right now. So yeah, it's kind of humming right along. It's kind of humming right along. It's not doing too bad. Yeah, if I had better hardware, I'm not some big baller rich guy. 25, this is the shuttle box. And it's it's a nice little box. Put in a 2 terabyte hard drive, and you can see it's using out of the 32 gig, it's using almost 10 gig right now. CPUs are just kind of humming right along. So it's not a bad box. It's not a bad box. What does my electric bill look like? We really don't want to go there. That's not a good subject. These are 610. Oh, that's actually 1420. That's a 1425. Sorry about that. Here's a 610. So the 610s are a little bit nicer boxes. They're I'm sorry, not 610, 6100. So this is what the 6100 looks like. If I can get a Google image of it. There you go. So I got I think 8 of these. I don't have them all powered on yet, but I got 4 of them 4 of them hooked up, and the others aren't powered on yet. And then I've got the shuttle box. Oh yeah, you can have the slides. I'm going to give out the slides, guys. I went with this. I bought these on eBay for like $300 each. You know, so I mean, I think I did pretty well. I shopped around for a long, long time trying to get the most horsepower I could in the cheapest boxes I could. So let's say we try to look at like a Dell 6100. These suckers are fully loaded, so they're going to be really, really pricey. Yeah, these suckers are loud. I'm not kidding. This stuff is loud. So here's a Dell, here's C6100. Let's see what specs it's got. So you got a C6100. It's a 2-node setup. Mine's a 4-node setup. So when you get down in here and you, let's see, down in here, each one of these cases right here, you're going to put up to 4 hard drives per slot. So it's literally 4 servers. It's literally 4 servers. It's not one big box. It's literally 4 servers. Each one. Oh, what did I get? I got a half rack. See, I think I got a 21U half rack. See if you can find the rack that I have. And I think my rack was like, I think that rack that I got, it's an open rack. It's not one of these. It's my rack was like $90. No, I bought it from one of those rack companies. I mean, it was used. I mean, almost everything I buy is either used or refurbished or something like that. You know, it was pretty cheap. Let's see, server racks. I'll find it. But it's not. It was like a 21U rack is what I ended up with, and it was open. It's not enclosed. I'll find it for you guys where I got it from. Okay, what did I do for my internet? My internet, I got, I use Comcast, so I got a Comcast business. So it's a couple $100 a month for the 50 meg. Now, some of the guys who are really close to me, they've got Fios, and Fios will give them 100 meg and even as far up as a gig to your house. So I don't have Fios. I've got the Comcast 50 meg business, which is costing me about $300 a month. And then I just use OpenVPN, and that's how I VPN into the lab. With all those servers, am I trying to get off Amazon AWS? I actually use Amazon AWS as well. So I've got Amazon AWS, Amazon Virtual Private Cloud. I've got my hosting company, which runs my websites, and then I've got this stuff here at the house, which is all these servers. Is it taking me to the edge of divorce? The answer is yes. Yes, yes, and yes. It's a tough thing, man, because what kind of router do I use? Believe it or not, it's just a Soho router. It's a little D-Link Soho router. Yeah. All right, so let's jump right back on this stuff. Okay, Pentester tips. If you're really trying to do this stuff, you really are going to have to get down and build a real environment. And that means building stuff like Active Directory, building your Cisco infrastructure with GNS3. You're really going to have to get down in there, and you're going to be building a lot. How do you keep up with the latest vulnerabilities and exploits? How do you decide what types of vulnerabilities to put into the network? How do you design the network? And then what types of defensive measures do you put into the network? So let's jump right in there. The exploits and stuff are actually the easiest. You know, go to exploit DB, go to package storm security. Those are the ones that I really like. And you know, every week yank down the latest tools and the latest exploits. Try your best to run through them every week. You know, if you can run through them every week, you'll get a pretty good idea of what's going on in the industry. One of the things that you need to make sure you don't fall prey to, exploit DB, at least on the vulnerability side, is what a lot of people don't realize is a lot of people learning exploit dev. You know, once you actually take my exploit dev class, I think this will make more sense. But you very rarely find an exploit that goes beyond an SEH overwrite and sophistication. You don't find a lot of really advanced heap spray exploits and, you know, like Peter Van Eckhout's precision heap spray and all this kind of stuff. You don't really find a lot of use after free vulnerabilities. You don't really find double freeze and null pointer dereference stuff, you know, because those are hard exploits to do, and people who are usually good enough to write that kind of stuff usually don't put it on exploit DB, they sell it. So you're going to find that exploit DB, in a lot of cases, believe it or not, is bad. I don't want to say this like I'm talking crap about exploit DB, but it's not necessarily the best reference of vulnerable software that you're going to find in an enterprise environment. You know, you need to be conscious that most of the exploit frameworks, Metasploit Core, Saint, Canvas, they scrape exploit DB. And then they have these tools that automatically grab the exploits off exploit DB and then port them into their particular framework. And then someone from QA just goes and verifies that the exploit works, then drops the sucker into the trunk. So you're going to find that a lot of the exploits that are in most of these frameworks, for anybody who does a lot of pen testing, you'll hear the big complaint. You know, why the hell do you have exploits for like Paint Shop Pro? You know, I'm not running into this stuff on pen test. And what it is somebody who's learning exploit development wrote an exploit for Paint Shop Pro, version 2.1. Whatever, that's 3 years old. So he gets that, he throws it into exploit DB. Now all of a sudden it gets sucked into the exploit framework companies because Core, Canvas, Metasploit, they sell, one of their big selling points is number of exploits. Their selling points is not quality of exploits, it's number. They love being able to tell you that they got, 1,200 exploits in the framework. So you need to be very conscious, focus on the really popular applications that you're going to find in enterprise environments. Really focus on Adobe, Apple, Oracle, anything that you're going to find in an enterprise environment. That's the stuff that I would be focusing on. A lot of people Or like, hey, what about, you know, all these PHP, WordPress, all this kind of stuff. And the reason that I'm telling you to do the PHP, WordPress kind of stuff is you're starting to see a lot of that. A lot of companies have blogs and that kind of stuff. You're going to see a lot of that. So, you know, definitely spend some time focusing on that stuff. Okay, how do you design your network? You gotta kind of be conscious of you're the one designing it, so hacking it's going to be easy for you. So you got to kind of keep in mind, like, okay, what are the key things that I want to do? Generally, what you want is when you're just getting started, you pretty much just need a flat network. You don't need lots and lots of VLANs and routed segments where these types of servers are in this subnet and these types of workstations are in this subnet. You don't really need a lot of that kind of stuff when you're first getting started. Now, later on, you might find yourself doing some network segmentation if you're going to have an environment that stays in place. So if you're going to get to the situation where you bought 2 or 3 shuttle boxes, and now you're running, you know, 100, 150 virtual machines, then yeah, you probably do want to build a DMZ and, you know, build a little LAN and set up some VLANs and stuff like that, so that you can build what starts to really look like a real pen test environment. And if you're only going to be able to run, let's say, 15 to 20 virtual machines at one time, even if you do build a DMZ and a you know, a couple of network segments and all that stuff, you're probably only going to have 2, 3 machines per network segment. So you'll be able to do some proof of concept stuff, but you're not going to be able to really replicate a real environment until you can start to throw a lot of horsepower at it. So you always want to kind of keep that in mind. Now, can you do some really interesting things with the DMZ type stuff? Yes. But you always need to remember when you're building a DMZ, you're going to want from an attacker, hey, how do I get from the DMZ into the LAN? Well, there needs to be some sort of mistake. You know, a server in the DMZ that has periodic communication with a host that's in the LAN. A server in the DMZ that has periodic communication with a host that's in the secondary DMZ, like a database server or something like that. So you're going to need to build that. So I think if you're doing stuff like this, you're probably building like a CTF, or you're building a lab network for your school, something like that, where you're building these vulnerabilities and you're baking the vulnerabilities into them. You're going to need to either yourself be pretty comfortable with common misconfigurations that people do in an environment, or you're going to really need to get a lot of sysadmin guys to kind of help you out and talk to you about what they do with their job and how they tune this stuff. Okay, how do I secure it from attackers from the outside? That's a really good question. I use OpenVPN. I use some firewall rules to restrict machines that are connected to the VPN from routing back out. And then I have a series of scripts that check all of the machines every hour. So, you know, we run like a lot of PowerShell type stuff, and you know, we have like a lot of management type stuff. Yeah, I don't do a honeypot type thing. If you look at my environment, we have a series of scripts. Let's see. So we use Carlos Perez's VI toolbox with PowerCLI. and then we wrote some wrappers around it. So then we wrote some wrappers around it, and then what that gives you the ability to do is to interact with the host. So if I want to, since I've got so many ESX servers, you might want to just say, okay, sometimes trying to find a server, you're like, hey, I need to reboot .105. So you should be able to let's say I want to display a host by IP address of 10.10.10.105. Oh, I changed the passwords on these. Sorry, I'm doing some debugging work. But what it would do is it gives you a list. Okay, this machine is on this ESX server. Do you want to reboot it? Do you want to update VMware tools? Do you want to do this kind of stuff, or do you want to change the port group that it's in and assign it to a different network? And for me, that's been pretty handy. I got to tell you, the overwhelming majority of stuff that I've really wanted to do in terms of PowerShell, with VMware, it's been Carlos Perez's stuff that's been flat out amazing. I really think that's pretty cool. How do you simulate routers and switches in the virtual environment? That's funny you ask, because that's right on the next thing, right? Okay. Try to focus on a flat, simple architecture. Wait a little bit on DMZs, routers, and switches. Cisco vulnerabilities, they're pretty rare. Firewall vulnerabilities are even older. You just don't find a lot of that kind of stuff. So when you do find like actual iOS vulnerabilities, like being able to dump the routing config, at the end of the day, when you attack a router, it's generally going to be clear text protocols and brute forcing, right? So people who log into the router via telnet and stuff like that. So you don't get a whole lot by building a Cisco infrastructure with GNS3 in terms of being able to attack the Cisco infrastructure, because basically attacking a Cisco infrastructure is clear text protocols and weak passwords. There's not much more you can do, because all the real buggy stuff in iOS has pretty much been cleaned up ever since iOS 12. So what about defensive things? I really think you should try to look at like Security Onion. It's a fast way that you can spin up a full-blown environment, and then inside of that full-blown environment you can have ELSA and all that. So what I did was every workstation in my environment is running event to sys, and all those logs go to ELSA. So every workstation in the environment has remote sys log turned on, and then your network devices, you can do the same thing. So now the question is, what about your router infrastructure stuff? And I think you really want to look at pssense, Viata, and then for your Cisco stuff, GNS3. Now you can even run Juniper stuff now with GNS3. So, if you're into that kind of stuff, you can definitely do it. The racks that I've been looking at the most is this guy who wrote a blog post on his CCIE security rack in GNS3. I thought that was pretty good. So CCIE security GNS3. He wrote a pretty good blog post about what he had to do to get it all working. if you're going to use security rack, GNS3, and he did it on like GNS3 with Ubuntu. Yeah, this is it. And it was pretty good. It was a lot of jerry-rigging, a lot of messing around to make this stuff work, but you definitely can get this going. So for those of you, when you hear me say Dynamips, Dynagems, GNS3 is the GUI front end to Dynamips, Dynagems. Dynamips, Dynagems lets you, yeah, this is going to be available later, no problem, but yeah, you take care, Steph. Dynamips, Dynagems is what's going to allow you to run Dynamips, Dynagems is what's going to allow you to run live Cisco IOSs. Okay. All right, so let's finish this up. We're almost done. Okay, so what are some good resources for how to build a lab? There's a pretty good presentation done by the guys at Rapid7. And then this one on how to set up a pentest lab and how to play in a CTF. I think you'll find that that one's pretty helpful too. And then I have to do a shameless plug for my CTF. Shameless plug for my CTF. So guys, on my blog, you'll see it says, shall we play a game? It's going to be a network attack and defense CTF, and you are going to learn a huge amount in this. This game is going to be great for beginners and intermediates. It's $50 per person if you want to play. Jump on in. It's going to be a great game to learn. It's designed for beginners. So the better you can do incident response on your virtual machine that you're defending, the more that you'll know what to attack in the future machines. So I really hope that you guys play. I really hope to get some people out there. I'm going to provide the logs to all the participants. So everything's going to be logged with syslog and ELSA. I'm going to be recording all traffic with Security Onion. So you'll have live IDS and play. You'll have host-based traffic recording, command line recording. So if you play, you get all the logs for everything. Okay, so I'd love if you guys would jump in and play. I think you're going to learn a lot in the game. I think you're going to have a whole lot of fun. The other thing that I'm working on right now, I've had some students, this is actually a blog post I'm writing right now. So I've had some students ask me, can I put together a small class to get you ready for the game? So this is what I'm working on right now. It looks like it's going to be about $50. It'll be 2 days a week, and it'll be a small class that just teaches you the kinds of things you want to be prepared for so that you can play in the game. So I'm almost done with this blog post. I should have it up by tonight. And I'll send you guys an email so you guys will know all about it. But I'm really hoping that you get in and play and have some fun. I'm going to try and do these once a quarter. So there's going to be a ton of CTF stuff. Right now, I'm charging for them because I'm building the infrastructure. But hopefully, by the end of next year, after we've run a few of them, I'll actually start making them all free. But I'm really trying my best to keep them really cheap. It's only $50 to play. And let's just get in. Let's just have some fun. I guarantee I'll make it something where you learn a lot if you're new or intermediate. And then even if you're really skilled, there's going to be so much going on in the game. There'll be a lot to learn for you as well. All right, does anybody have any questions for me? how do you have the network reset a hung machine? So what do I use? I use Nagios, actually, and then I use Nagios to monitor services, and then I use Power CLI to restart the virtual machines, VMware's Power CLI. No, never used Puppet to automate spinning up VMs. It sounds pretty cool. Am I running Pentester's Weekend Bootcamp this weekend? No, I need to move it. I need to move it because I'm doing the CTF with the Women's Cyber Jitsu group. So I'm probably going to move that to either Sunday or another day. Will we be getting packet dumps during the CTF? During the game, no. But later on, yes. How's Power CLI different from regular PowerShell? It just gives you a lot of additional features. How much have you spent on my equipment total? Yeah, I don't really want to put that number out there because you know, my fiance is within earshot, so definitely not going to say that. I think you can keep building a lab under about $500 if people are trying to look for a good reasonable number. You know, maybe 300 on the low end, and then you know, 500 to 800 on the intermediate, a little over 1,000 for a pretty robust lab. I personally think you can keep it, in my opinion, fairly reasonable. I'd love for you to get your CCDC group into the game. Remember, you don't need to sign up as a whole team. You can sign up individually, and then as I work with people, I'll be putting people on teams. So even if you don't have a team for the CTF, you can certainly go for that. For the whole EC2 stuff, it's just a personal preference. I'll put certain things in EC2. I'll put certain things at my house. Am I a CISSP or CEH? The answer is yes. I've been teaching that stuff for several years. I haven't really taught a lot of it lately, but yeah, I've been. Can I show the last slide again? Yep. Okay. All right, the email for being in this webinar, I'm going to give you guys access to all of this stuff. Do I have honeypots and spam traps in my environment? No, I don't. Do I recommend them? I think that's if you're trying to learn that kind of stuff. Like, I used to be part of the HoneyNet project when I was trying to learn malware analysis. So yeah, it was a really good experience for me. Do I accept outside help? Oh my God, yes. So if you're interested in that, send me an email and then just in the subject in all caps, write helper. And then we can chit chat and, you know, but be careful what you wish for. I'm in class till January, but afterwards I'll look for the next CTF. Okay, great. Oh yeah, I did help train a lot of the teams. Okay, good, good. All right. Well, listen, guys, let's button this up. I had a great time. This is going to be available for download. You guys are going to get an email with a link to all this kind of stuff, and it'll be available on the website and the whole bit. So shoot me emails for webinars of the kinds of things you want me to cover in the future, like the Amazon EC2 and, you know, OpSource and CloudShare and Rackspace and all that kind of stuff, if you guys want me to cover that kind of stuff. I'm always looking for what I can do for a free webinar. I'm going to try to do one free event per month. So just kind of let me know, and whatever you guys want me to talk about, if I can put it together, I'll certainly do it. Okay. Cloud stuff? Yeah, I don't mind covering cloud stuff. Okay. All right, guys, everybody take care. Oh, a whole thing on security onion. That could be fun. Hey, I appreciate that, David. All right, guys, everybody take care.